Hello everyone, my name is George Slatkovsky and you are watching an edited version of my latest live stream where I covered all of the functions of my new plugin, CurveTools. This plugin was made almost exclusively to make hair cards for characters, real-time hair, but of course it also can be used to make cables, braided cables, and it has a lot of options, and we basically cover every function and every option in this video, so enjoy. So essentially what you need to do to create those curves is to just click one button and that's it. So here we go, and it's basically done. So it's fully interactive, you can do it whatever you want with it, and also the same functionality goes for the tubes. So you can just create them and change the divisions, like width and everything, and basically the same thing as the card. So that's great. You can create the default ones, but what if you have like I don't know, some random curve that you want to turn into the curve card? Well, that's easy. You just click this next button. Let me just rebuild the curve really quickly because it's a little bit too dense. And you just select this and here you go. You have the curve over here, and you can change the orientation, the twist, and basically the same functions as the default cards over here. So that's pretty simple. So those are creation buttons over here: new card, new tube, new curve card, and curve tube. So those are to create curves, and also we have add cards. So this is a very cool button because what you essentially can do is to fill empty space between curves with other curves, basically. Here we go. I mean, the orientation is can be a little bit weird, but it automatically generates curves and it applies material, and everything is absolutely the same for those curves, so they can twist and turn and everything that you want them to do. So now you can add additional curves in between. And the same goes for the tubes, of course, so you can just add tubes. But the thing is, you need to know with cards and tubes is that it takes options from the first selected curve. And if it's a card, it will skip some of the options that you have for the tubes. So the nice thing about this is that you can actually do something like this, for example, deform the card somehow. And then let me just do something different so you can see it better, like that. And then if you select two curves and click Add Cards, you will see that it tries to blend between those curves and basically add them in the natural way. Also, blending in between any number of curves, so you can just add them, and of course orientation is that, and it will gradually and smoothly change between them. So if you can imagine like if you are doing something like hair. So if you're doing something like hair, you have two curves in over here, for example, and you want to fill the gap because, well, yeah, you can see the scalp there or something. You just click Add Card, and by default I think it's 2 or 3, I don't know, but I'm mostly using like 1 because that's the best way, I think. So that's add cards, and the same thing goes for add tubes. So you just add tubes in between. So edge to curve, we'll talk about it a little bit later. Now let's talk about layers. So if you have so many curves as in this project, you need a way to organize them. So one way, of course, is classic Maya outliner. So you can just group them together. The layers is the main thing that I assume you will want to use, because it's not only the layers, they also have some hidden functions there. So let's just talk about those. So I've created those cards, and my first layer was selected right here. So by default, it selects the first layer, and everything just goes in there. So it will go over here. But for example, I want to create cards in the 9th layer. So you just select this layer, Add Card, and as you can see, the layer now changes color. It's now filled with something, and you can control click it, and it will basically select everything in that layer over here. So that's the organization part of the layers. And of course, you can just select the curves over here and right click and add selection to layer. So you can switch between layers pretty easily. You can even select everything on the model and just dump it all into one layer if you want. The easiest way is just to select and add selection to layer, and it will just add this to this layer. And layers are exclusive. You cannot have one curve in two layers. It's not a limitation. Actually, you do want to have that, because if you'll have like one curve in different layers or something like that, you'll just have crazy time organizing stuff. All right, so now you can add stuff to layers. And as you can see, I already have quite a few layers over here. What you can do with layers is you can extract geometry. So you want to have some ability to export this geometry because by default it's not selectable. You can toggle geometry edit. So that's how you enable the editing of geometry. Can you also hide? Of course, you can hide layers. I'll just briefly show you. You just use gestures like that and just hide everything else that you don't want. You can see. Only some stuff is left. And then if you want to re-enable everything, you have options, reset layers visibility, just like that. So toggle geometry edit. We'll talk about editing a little bit later because there are some caveats that I want to address. So from here you can select curves. So for example, you can control click on the layer, but you can also just right click and select like that. As you can see, it just selects the entire layer. So you can also select geometry, although you cannot directly select it right now. You can just select it from the layer, just like that. You can also toggle curve visibility, so you can hide curves. If you want to, for example, have only the top layer of your hair that you're working on, you just hide everything else. Curves, I mean, because you don't want to have geometry there. You just hide curves like that and work on the top layer quite easily, because now there's a lot less curves to look at. So other functions here, geometry visibility. So if you just want to leave curves there for some reason, you have the option. You can just toggle geometry off, just like that. And as you can see, layers, they change color. I'm still working on this feature. I will have a little bit more of color coordination for this. But right now, as you can see, it just grays out the invisible ones. And if you enable geometry edit, it will have this red triangle over here, as you can see. And that's pretty much it right now. And empty layer, of course, is just an empty layer. Okay, we can toggle the visibility, toggle geometry visibility, and toggle the visibility of the entire layer. So that's cool. Let's just reset visibility. So that's layers. And extract geometry. Let's talk about that. Now, in the version 1.1, as you can see, it's in beta right now. In version 1.1, you will just be able to select all the curves and click one button, and it will just extract everything. So you'll have a group with all of your selected curves. Right now, you just right-click on the layer and click extract geometry. And what it does, it will not delete your original curves and geometry, of course. What it will do, it will extract geometry and just hide the layer under this thing. So let's just extract. And of course, you can just extract layer by layer. And as you can see, we have groups. Yeah, so it basically duplicates the geo and it leaves the original geo and curves and the entire network. It will just leave it hidden, so you can just edit it. Of course, it hides everything. It hides the curve, it hides the geometry, and there are also some construction stuff over here. It's by default hidden, so just don't bother about that. Yeah, so it hides everything. Extract. So now you have everything extracted, and as you can see, you will have everything by itself. So if you want to go ahead and just vertex by vertex edit everything to perfection, you can definitely do that. You can just go and select anything you want and basically edit. That's just regular geometry. There's nothing special about it. As you can see, it's okay. So this thing is extracted right now. Let's just select everything, combine. So yeah, and now you'll have just the geometry. You can delete the original groups. Don't forget to delete history before you delete the original groups, because you will lose your materials. it's Maya. So now you have the original, the extracted geometry, and now you can just go ahead and, for example, you can smooth it. Just one iteration, more than enough. So you'll have smooth geometry over here. By the way, if you're wondering how I can see curves that's a little bit of a trick, because by default you cannot see curves that easily. Okay, so this is a post-recording. I completely forgot to mention that on stream. So the way how you can see the curves clearly like that on your model is actually very simple trick. It's screen space ambient occlusion. Everything is turned down to minimum, so you will not see any ambient occlusion on the model. But the way it works is when you enable it, you can actually see through geometry, and you can see the curves themselves. So this is very useful. So I have this thing hotkeyed to a button, so I can just switch to, on and off this ambient occlusion, and I can really easily see the curves, and you will be able to switch between two modes really easily. So you can smooth this, you can just go ahead and reduce it. I mean, do whatever you want. That's just regular geometry, and your original stuff is intact. So let's just delete it and reset layers visibility. Here's your curves. Everything is fine. Continue your work. You tested this thing in the engine. You tested it in Marmoset or whatever you're using. You came back. Everything works. Everything is here. Every curve is still editable with no problem. So that was the layers. Okay, so about those selection buttons. Now, sometimes you want to select just the geometry because, for example, you want to see your UVs. So let's just go into UV editor, and let's just click. As you can see, geometry is still not selectable. You select the curve, and then you just have those buttons. Select geo, and here we go. You have your UVs selected. Everything is fine. You can see where they are. You can see the texture, and you can also go back to curve right away from this geometry. You don't need to click anything, just select curve and it will just go back to curve. And of course it works on everything. I mean, multi-selection compatible, that's just must have. And the same thing, you can just select the group. If you, for example, if you want to group something in the outliner, you don't really need to go into outliner. You can just select it, go to select groups, Control G, and it will group it in the outliner. You don't need to even look at it. My whole goal with those layers is to just close this window and never open it until I'm done. Now about grouping. You can just select groups and do the regular grouping right there. You can also just use this group curves button. So you select curves, you name your curve hair, for example, group curves, and it will do everything for you. It will group stuff in the outliner. As you can see, hair 1. It's your group. You can now use this group to basically move those curves with no problem. You can change pivot point. You can move them however you want. Use the group. So that's grouping. Now select CVs. Now that is really cool slider because I wanted to. I had a problem where I couldn't quite select some of the UVs that I want. That was before I found this workaround with the visibility, and so I just made a slider that. When you select curve, it will basically slide between CVs. It will slide between them, and also you can just click over here and shift click on the slider to select basically a little section of your curve. And of course, this thing is multi-selection compatible. So as you can see, selection process is easy right now. You just select this CV, you move it, select the last CV, move it, and everything is great. Okay, so that's select CV. Very simple thing, just use it. Right now we'll talk about pivot point. Right now those pivots are by default on the origin of the curve, right here. So on the first CV. So when you rotate them, rotate the curves like that, and of course you want to use world coordinates here. When you rotate like that, as you can see, it rotates around this CV. Now, so sometimes, for example, for ponytail or something like that, when you're editing it or you're moving it, you want to have your pivot in one location. So it will just move like one mesh. One way is to just group it, but you can also just go ahead and hold, press D, hold V, and just snap pivot point to one curve, and now it will behave like one curve. So that's simple Maya stuff. You should know that, but right now you want to return to editing your curves, and now pivot point is right here. You just, what can I do about it? Well, not a problem, just click reset pivot, and it will snap the pivot back to its original position. And here you go. You just go ahead and move and rotate your curves like you want it to. Okay, now rebuild curve. Now this slider is also very useful because sometimes I want to lower the resolution of my curve or increase it. For example, for something like braid, you want higher resolution, you want this control move very small amounts of geometry. But for something like ponytail, for example, or this hair over here, you don't really want that control. You need smoothness of your mesh. So you just go over here, select your curves, and drag this rebuild curve slider. Right now it works like that. You just select the curves and you drag it. And as you can see, it will interactively rebuild your curve to the resolution that you want. Now it maxes at 50 by default, but of course you can just type the value over here and you'll have 200 CVs. I don't know why you need that, but it's there. So this reset button over here, it's used to basically reset the slider. It will not rebuild your curve. It will just reset the slider range because you increased the range by typing manually, and now you just want to return back to this precision. You just reset this slider and it will go to 50 once again. So that's just a little bit of an additional feature right here. Rebuild curve works perfectly fine. It will not destroy your curves, don't worry. It just rebuilds the curve. Everything works, as you can see. So now the utility functions over here, those are duplicate, of course. You need to duplicate your curves to actually work on them. Extend, reduce, and smooth. So those are very simple. Extend will just extend your curve by this factor over here. You just have the slider and you can extend it by a little bit or however you want. And it will try to interpolate the curvature. As you can see, well, it tries to maintain this curvature, but just use this factor slider sparingly because you can have unexpected results here. I'll just warn you right away because next version is coming. Now reduce, same thing. It will just reduce the curve and extend the curve. So as you can see, it tries to do linearly now. And I haven't talked about it, but you have this triangle over here. It's an indicator of modifier. So you can click Shift and it will do a slightly different thing. So this extend has two algorithms to it. So if you click Shift, it will try to maintain the curvature. And if you just click without Shift, as you can see, it tries to do something weird here. Now smooth is just smooth. Simple as that. You select the factor and you smooth the curve however you want, like that. It also has marking menu, 1, 3, 5, and extend. So you can just smooth it really hard, like that, and basically have straight lines over here. So that's smooth, really easy. Now let's talk about control curve and this apply button over here. Let's just make some weird shape with those curves so I can show you what it's all about. Now we have a collection of curves, and as you can see, it's not that easy to select them. Well, it's easy to select them, but it's not that easy to precisely edit them. This control curve, you just click it, and what it does, it basically takes all of those curves and apply a warp modifier to them using the curve that is right in the middle of all of those curves. So as you can see, it's right in the middle of it calculates the middle point and it creates the curve. Now you can use one curve to edit all of your curves. And the cool thing is you can just select the edit curve right here, click apply, and everything is fine. You continue your editing right here. So that's control curve. Curve control window, that's just an additional window that you can use to control your curves. So by default, every option is in the channel box over here. Also, if you are a fan of the attribute editor, you can go to extra attributes of your curve and all the additional parameters. Here you go, a little bit smaller window that you can use, or just use channel box. That's really the best thing. So what do we have here? It mirrors all the attributes of the curve. And when you select something, for example, I will change the length division over here. And if you when you select something, it updates. So it's interactive. You don't need to guess what option you have here. And of course you can just change orientation right here. Not a problem. Twisting. So that works pretty fine on this curve control. Absolutely the same thing goes with channel box. And also you have this reset sliders because, as you may know, almost every slider in Maya, you can just overcrank it. If you just add 2000 and well, it will do something. Let's just increase the divisions. As you can see, it created a bunch of those things. And as you can see, now the slider has different range, just like with the rebuild curve. Just reset slider and it will return back to its 360 minus 360. In the channel box, you are limited by default to the same values, but you of course can just go ahead and type your value here. Okay, so that's controlling the curves. Now let's talk about the transferring attributes. So you have a bunch of curves and you have different attributes on them. Let's just zero this out, change the orientation a little bit. Very dense over here, twisted. This is a little bit less dense, and again twisted and dense. Okay, let's just transfer attributes from this curve to this. As you can see, it basically copies all of the options. And of course, once again, it's multi-selection compatible. So if you want to copy this option to those curves, just transfer attributes and that's it. The only thing that you need to remember is you need to select the curve that you are transferring from first. And after that, select everything that you want. So now you have transferring of attributes. That's not transferring of UVs. That's just attributes of the curve. Let's just see what other options we have on the curves. So let's talk about settings a little bit. So you already know orientation, twist, width. You also have taper. So if you want to taper your curve like that, it's a modifier. You don't need to edit your geometry. It just tapers the curve to a point if you want. Of course, you don't really want to go to a point, just a little bit of a taper over here. You also have profile. You already saw the profile over here. It will, let me just increase the resolution so you can see what profile we have. It's a smooth profile over here. It will just from -2 to +2. And as always, just go ahead and increase the profile if you want. By default, it caps at 2. Now, refinement is a little bit more complex. So as you can see, you have a bunch of UVs over here. But you want to maintain smoothness of the geometry, but you don't want to increase the resolution of the curve that you are working with. So you'll have this nice low resolution curve, but the geometry will think that your curve is higher resolution than it is. So that's what is curve refine. So you can just crank it up and let's just decrease it, just so you see the difference. I'll decrease it a little bit. I'm decreasing it, and as you can see, geometry will start moving. And the lower you get on this refinement, the harder it is for geometry to maintain the shape. Now, why it is a slider and it's not just cranked up to like 500, right? It's a slider because it can impact performance. So I don't know what you need, right? So I have a slider. You can use it to dial your curves to your needs. So that's refined. Smoothness is very simple concept. You can just smooth the geometry a little bit. That actually really helps to eliminate some of the pinching over here that you will get if you just have the really hard angle over here, just like that. And you can just go ahead. You don't want to go and edit the geometry, the curve. Just go ahead and increase the smoothness just a little bit. As you can see, it will have a little bit of additional smoothness on the torrents over here. So that's that. Now let's talk about Solidify. That's very simple concept. That's just extrusion. But of course, it works with the changing of divisions. So it's, again, fully functional extrusion with all of the other functions over here. And about UVs, we'll talk about later. You can increase the thickness of this thing however you want. And of course, the same goes for the tube. You can just go ahead and solidify it like that and increase the thickness and just continue editing geometry, just like that. Right, great. So that's extrusion. Explore those options. They are very simple. Offset will just offset the geometry a little bit, so we'll have this profile over here. Now let's talk about the hard part, the UVs. When you create a curve, let me just start from scratch. So you created a curve with card attached to it, basically, and you want to apply some kind of material to it. You want to apply hair material, for example. That can be not. You can use it for other purposes as well. So what I say in my blog about this plugin, it's easy to just select the curve and press up. And as you can see, up just goes one layer up in the outliner. So we selected this and press up. It will go over here. Hold right click, select existing material, and for example, hair cards shader. That's what I'm using over here. As you can see, by default, it looks a little bit weird. I mean, I want this, and it looks like, what the hell is this? So let's just investigate really quickly. You go to your UV editor and what you will see, this slab of the UV, right? So you have basically stretched UV, it's uniform. And when you change like subdivisions, it will just change the subdivisions over here. So it updates real time. So how will you move this UV to your texture? So you can think that you can go to geometry edit and go ahead and like, I don't know, use some kind of, for example, lattice. Let's just pretend that this is all right, okay? So you have your UV and now you go ahead and place it somewhere and you think, hey, I need additional resolution to this card. You start increasing your divisions and instant Picasso, you don't want that. This is just broken UVs. Maya doesn't know how to handle updates on the UVs. There might be a workaround for this, I don't know. So you don't want that. I will disable geometry edit, and what I will do, I will just close this and I will look at the viewport and move my UVs using those parameters. So as you can see, I can move my UVs. Let me just enable this. I can move my UVs horizontally, move U, and move V. We'll move them like that. So you just go ahead and select your curve, select your geometry right here. You can scale it in U, of course. You can scale it a little bit, and here you go, almost done. You just need a little bit of additional moving around and scaling. And of course, I need to rotate it because it's inverted right now. So you can rotate it as well. Let's just scale it a little bit, and here we go. So you only need to do this once. You applied your materials, UVs, I mean, not materials. You need to apply it to other cars. Let's just add the existing material and shaders. And I will just select this one, and here we go. Transfer UVs, as I told, done. It's very simple. You just need to spend a little bit of your time in making those, and then you just transfer them to your existing ones. So that's great. Use those options, and as I told you, if you use those options, as you can see, you can change the geometry density over here, and nothing will break until Maya breaks itself, of course. So just like that. So use those options. It's a little bit tricky. Maybe I will do something different later on. By the way, if you have any problems, just help. Open PDF documentation, and you can go ahead and just read stuff. I will make a video later on. This video will be on YouTube as well. You can just go over here and click, for example, I want to know what layer is, and curve layers stuff just explains you everything over here. Okay, so options. You go to options, and there are some stuff that I want to talk about. So I already accidentally clicked reset to defaults. That just resets your plugin to default values. There's not a lot of options here, but if anything goes wrong, just reset to defaults and everything is fine. Update layers is just a utility button. Reset layers visibility I already told you about. You just hide your layers, for example, right here, and you just reset them to its initial values of visibility. It will show you everything, so you can just hide it again if you want. Curve group selection is to select curves additively or exclusively. So for example, if you want additive selection through the menu, if you don't want to click Shift and select all of the, just show you, all of the curves like that, for some reason, just use Shift. So you can select everything, or you can just go additive here and select curves additively through your layers. Just a utility, nothing special. Now, Bezier curves are kind of supported right now, but please use EP curves for now, edit points curves, because Bezier are a little bit weird in Maya, and it will, at some point, it can break. I just warn you right away, just use EP. It's very stable. I mean, I made this thing with 0 crashes. Okay, so curve card populate keep settings, that's Solidify off and add cards. Now, as you can see, it blends the settings between those cards. And if you just use default, it will insert the default cards in between. As you can see, they are a little bit weird over here. it will just insert in, default cards in between. I don't know why you need that because you do want to copy those settings automatically, but it's there if you need that. Now, this is very important button over here, change scale factor. I don't know at what scale you're working. So I've added this option just for you to be able to create curves at different scales. For example, as you can see, width is now 1, and it's relatively good for this kind of scale. But if you want to make something smaller, you just go into options, change scale factor. Let's just close this. And for example, go for 0.5. It will not affect your existing curves. So it will only affect new curves. So don't worry about that. New card. And as you can see, it's a little bit, it's exactly half of this card. So this basically change scale of everything in the plugin. Change scale to 2, for example, and this slider goes quite a lot. So I think you will be satisfied with the range. And as you can see, it's exactly the twice of this. So why use this and not use width? Because, well, you want to keep this width to 1 or something, so it will be easier to change later on. So you just dial the change scale factor and you're good. Randomize, right? So we talked about it a little bit before. Let's just click this randomize. And you have this menu over here. What it does is just randomizes everything. So you have options. You can randomize control points. You can randomize rotation of the curves, orientation, twist, and just go wild. You can do that. I'll just show you how it works really quickly. Let's just zero out the orientation here. What? Let's just delete those. Let's just use those. Duplicate. As you can see, you just select curves and you duplicate them and duplicate again. What you need to do is just click enable, rotation, twist, or stuff, what you want to randomize, and increase the multiplier. And you can also lock CVs, and you need to select the axis of randomization. And what it will do, it will slightly randomize the location of each CV based on this multiplier and this slider. Now look what it's doing. You increase the randomization, and you think, hey, that's great, I want that. What's happened? So this is just a preview. I want this to be a preview because I wanted you to know the magnitude of randomization. So you just click, drag this thing, and you see it's a preview. And if you want to apply it, just click randomize, and it will apply this randomization. And of course, you can just click and go wild. Same thing goes with rotation, orientation. Yes, it randomizes the values on those settings. So the curves, I mean the geometry stays the same. No, it's not a deformer. It's just a randomization of values. You don't need to delete history or something. Again, rotation. Let's select the axis. And as you can see, it tries to rotate a little bit. It, of course, rotates around the pivot point. And as you can see, you can randomize it a little bit. You can randomize the location and then click. And here we go. Some weird randomization, random shape. You can use that in all kinds of stuff, especially here. You sometimes want to randomize some stuff. It's just easy to do. And just explore other options. Let's talk about deformers. So you can deform your curves with all the deformers that you have in Maya. It's not a problem at all. You go to deform, lattice. Here we go. You have a deformer. And now you want to taper this thing, for example, right? You just select lattice point and taper those curves, just like that. You can, of course, just do this with regular curves, and that's not a problem. But sometimes you want that control with the deformer. And how do you apply it? You don't want this thing to just hover here. You select all of your curves, and scary thing, you delete your history. And that's it. Now you do want to edit, delete by type, history, Alt, Shift, D. You don't want to delete everything, because if you delete history on your scene, of course, it will stop working. So let's just go ahead and test other deformers. For example, let's say twist, right? So cool deformer. Let's enable the handles, and let's twist our curves a little bit. Just like that. You can twist them into some kind of weird shape. You can select everything, And deformer, you just select everything and delete history. And you know what? It still works just perfectly fine. Every option here, you can increase the resolution with no problems at all. So that's it. Edge to curve. We completely forgot about that. So that's a very simple function. And let's convert some of the edges of this tube to curves. So what it will do, let's just find out really quickly. Change normals to something that we can actually see. You can change normals right here. You don't need to apply anything to the geometry. And let's just enable visibility and enable editing of the geometry. Let's select them and convert them to curves. So cool. It converted them to curves. But what now? Let's try to twist it. Hey, look at this. It just follows the original geometry. So you can twist and bend and stuff. Now you might ask, can I convert those curves to geometry? Well, yes, of course. You can just select them. Deselect the original curve. You don't want to mess with that. And for example, let's just create curve tube and let's make it a little bit smaller because it's a little bit overpowering right here. And here, look at this. Now let's hide the original geometry. So now we have something that resembles the braid, and let's hide the curve visibility over here. So what I did is I've hidden the new curves and old geometry. Okay. And now what you can do, look at this. Procedural, braided, cable, or something. I mean, you can use, of course, you use this plugin only for hair, but you can also use it for this. I mean, cool. That took me like 5 minutes and it works perfectly fine. You can just do whatever you want with it. And now one caveat to this thing. Since we converted the edges to curves, the original edges of original triangular shape, as you remember, you cannot change length divisions and width divisions of the original shape because you will break everything. I don't want to show you that because, well, it's Maya. I don't want to risk it. But let's twist it a little bit more. Yeah, that looks cool. And now I will increase the width of the original. I'm increasing the width of the original geometry. And it spreads out the curves like that. Yeah, so you have procedural capabilities over here. And of course, you can go and do whatever you want. You can select edges on the curves, on the cards, not only tubes, and do this thing as well. Just a bunch of procedural tools. All right, so we covered everything now, edge to curve, and basically everything is great. Now, would it be hard to add ability to rotate around single point? Let's answer this with a new feature that comes to a new version. Now, as you can see, we have these two weird buttons over here, Extrude and Warp. You don't have those buttons on version 1.1. And right now, they just lie to you. It says that it works over here on the bottom, but it doesn't. Don't worry about that. And it creates some kind of geometry right now. It's a little bit big because I haven't added any attributes to it right now. But look at this. Hey. It behaves a little bit differently. And we have this field over here where we can dial the rotation of this curve however we want. Let's just increase the length a little bit. As you can see, it's not ready yet for prime time right now. But yeah, that's basically the ability to just create points and rotate them around. I want to integrate that in my plugin. It will have the same layer support. It will have the same attributes. Everything will be the same. It will be just another option. Okay, so that's just a future thing. Let's just ignore it for now, but you'll know that it's there. And that's how you'll be able to rotate around single points. Right now you cannot do that, but as you can see, although you cannot rotate around every point, you can still do quite a lot just with curves. I haven't edited this geometry. I just placed the curves and that's it. About editing the geometry, you need to be a little bit careful with it. So it's a procedural geometry, enable editing. And for example, I want to edit this edge. I don't know why, I just want to edit this edge like that. And it will not break your curve, of course. I mean, it works. But when you will try to go ahead and let's just disable, you see why I have this geometry edit thing. If you go ahead and, for example, increase your length divisions right now, it's not great, to say the least. Yeah, something's really wrong with this. So you can edit geometry, just don't edit divisions and basically divisions, the resolution of your curve. So you can do this at the last stage of your work. Editing geometry is supported partially right now. Okay, so thank you for watching. You can find all of the information and links to the store and timecodes and stuff like that in the description. So if you want to go ahead and return to this video later to use it as a reference, just go to description and there will be timecodes and yep. So thank you for watching. See you next time.